The ballroom was dark when I walked in, not dim, dark. Every chair still stacked, every table bare, and on the door where our welcome sign was supposed to be, there was a typed note from venue management. Reservation canceled, effective 5 days ago. 212 guests were already on their way. I stood there in my wedding dress, reading that note twice, and something inside me went very, very still. Not panic, not tears. Something colder than that. You need to know something about me before I tell you the rest of this story. I grew up in Decatur, Georgia. Not the pretty part, the part where your mom works double shifts and you learn early that no one is coming to save you. I put myself through Georgia State on Pell Grants and part-time bookkeeping jobs. By the time I was 29, I was the regional operations director for a hospitality group that managed 4 event venues across the metro Atlanta area. I knew every contract clause, every vendor override policy, every legal angle on a venue cancellation. I had spent 7 years becoming someone who could not be blindsided, except someone had tried very hard to blindside me. My fiancé's name was Christian. We met at a conference in Savannah 3 years before the wedding. He was charming, warm, the kind of man who remembered the names of everyone's kids and always picked up the check. His family was old Atlanta money, the kind that doesn't talk about money, just moves through the world as if cost is someone else's concern. His mother, whom I'll call my future mother-in-law for as long as that title still applied, had a last name that appeared on 2 hospital wings and a performing arts endowment. His father sat on the board of a private bank. His older sister had gone to Vanderbilt, married a commercial real estate developer, and spent her weekends at their lake house in Highlands, North Carolina. I had a nice apartment in Midtown and a very good savings rate. They were always polite to me. That was the thing. Nothing you could point to directly. No slur, no scene, no obvious cruelty. Just a particular kind of warmth that stopped exactly at the edge of genuine welcome, compliments that has a ceiling. Questions about my people in Decatur delivered with a smile that said the answer didn't matter. Christian's mother once told me I was remarkable, really, given everything, and I had smiled and thanked her and gone home and stared at my ceiling for an hour trying to figure out exactly what she meant by given everything. Christian told me I was too sensitive, that his family was just formal, that once we were married, it would all settle in. I had started keeping notes about 6 months before the wedding. Not because I was planning anything. Just because I am the kind of person who documents things. It's a professional habit. When something feels wrong, you write it down, you date it, you keep it somewhere safe. I had a folder on my laptop and a second backup on a thumb drive I kept in my desk at work. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. Our wedding was planned for the last Saturday of October. We had booked the Whitmore Estate, a historic venue outside Marietta that did about 40 weddings a year and had a waiting list. I had paid the full deposit myself, $28,000, because Christian's parents had offered to handle it, and I had smiled and said I preferred to keep the booking under my name. Christian thought I was being controlling. His mother had pressed her lips together in that particular way she had. I had kept the contract in my folder. The venue coordinator's name was, well, I'll just call her the coordinator, because what happened to her was not her fault, and she was nothing but gracious when everything unraveled. She called me at 9:47 in the morning on a Tuesday, 5 days before the wedding, to confirm our final head count. I confirmed. Everything was set. What I did not know, because no one told me, was that Christian's mother had called the Whitmore Estate the following morning and identified herself as the mother of the groom and a longtime family friend of the venue's original owner. She had told the coordinator that the wedding was being relocated due to a family matter, and that the deposit should be transferred to a new booking she was making at Harrington Hall, the private club where her family had been members for 40 years. The coordinator, who later told me she had no reason to question a call from the groom's mother, had processed the cancellation and noted it as a mutual agreement. She had never called me to verify. I did not learn any of this on that Tuesday morning. I learned it when I walked into a dark ballroom in my wedding dress. My phone rang as I stood there. It was my maid of honor, who I'll call my best friend because that's what she is, calling from the parking lot to ask where everyone should go. I told her I needed 5 minutes. I hung up and I called Christian. He answered on the second ring. Hey, are you there yet? How does it look? That sentence, how does it look, as if he didn't know. As if he was asking about centerpieces, I said, Christian, the venue is closed. The reservation was canceled 5 days ago. I need you to tell me right now if you knew about this. Silence. The specific silence of someone choosing their words. He said his mother had mentioned there might be a change of plans. that she had thought it would be a nice surprise, that Harrington Hall was so much more appropriate for a wedding of this size, and his family had connections there, and she had only been trying to help, and he had assumed someone would tell me, and maybe I had missed a message. I ended the call. I want to be clear about what happened in the next 4 minutes because people later asked me if I panicked, and the honest answer is no. I did not panic. I stood in that dark ballroom in a dress that had taken 4 fittings, and I did what I have done every time someone has underestimated me. I got very quiet and I started to think. I knew Harrington Hall. I had worked an event there once, years ago, as a contractor. I knew their event director. I also knew that Harrington Hall was a private club with a membership requirement, and I knew that not one person on my guest list, my family, my friends from Decatur, my colleagues, my college roommate, who had flown in from Portland, would have been made to feel welcome there. That was not an accident, that was the point. I called my best friend back. I told her to keep everyone in the parking lot and tell them we had a small logistics update. I told her to make it sound boring. She is magnificent under pressure, and she did exactly that. Then I called the senior coordinator at our backup venue. I should explain. In my line of work, you learn that things go wrong. Florists cancel. Caterers have emergencies. Venues double book. I had, quietly and without mentioning it to Christian, maintained a contingency relationship with the River Mill Event Center in East Atlanta. A converted textile mill with exposed brick and Edison lighting and a catering team I had worked with professionally for 3 years. I had called them 2 weeks before the wedding, not because I expected to need them, but because I am who I am. The senior coordinator there had told me that their Saturday was holding one tentative booking that hadn't confirmed. She had my number. She picked up on the first ring. I told her I needed to activate the contingency. She asked how many guests. I said 212. She said, "Give me 45 minutes and call me back." While I waited, I called my uncle, my mother's brother, who had driven up from Macon that morning in his truck. He had 4 friends with him who had all helped us move furniture the previous weekend and who I knew would do anything I asked without requiring an explanation. I told him what had happened in 2 sentences. He said, "Tell me where to go." I also made one more call. To a friend of mine from my early career days, a woman who now worked as a producer at one of the local news stations. We had kept in touch. I told her I had a story developing and that if she could get a camera to East Atlanta by 2 o'clock, she would not regret it. She said she'd see what she could do. By the time my best friend texted me that people were starting to ask questions, I had a venue, a catering team, a logistics crew, and a media contact. I walked out of the dark ballroom, got into the passenger seat of my best friend's car, and started making calls. What I had not yet done was open the second folder on my laptop, the one I had never shown Christian. I need to back up. 4 months before the wedding, I had been going through some paperwork, household stuff, nothing dramatic, and I had found a document that Christian had left in the home printer. It was a letter from his father's attorney. I read it because it had my name in it. It outlined what his family referred to as a postnuptial asset protection plan, which was a polite way of describing a document they intended to present to me after the wedding that would have transferred any jointly owned assets into a family trust controlled by Christian's parents in the event of a divorce. There was a line in it that referenced my premarital earnings and property as vulnerable to inclusion in shared marital estate. They had been planning to ask me to sign this after the wedding, when I would be a wife, not a fiancée, when walking away would be harder. I had taken a photograph of that document on my phone. I had printed 2 copies and put them in my folder. I had consulted, quietly and privately, with a family attorney friend who confirmed exactly what I already suspected. I had not confronted Christian. I had waited. Because I had learned, growing up where I grew up, that the moment you show your hand is the moment you lose your leverage. They had canceled my wedding venue without telling me. They had assumed I would arrive, find the situation, feel humiliated and outnumbered, and have no choice but to go to Harrington Hall on their terms. They thought the embarrassment of 200 guests standing in a parking lot would be enough to make me fall in line. They did not know about the River Mill. They did not know about my best friend, who was currently directing a parking lot full of guests like an air traffic controller. They did not know about my uncle and his 4 friends from Macon. They did not know about my friend with the camera. And they did not know that I had, in the left interior pocket of my bridal bag, the one that looked like it only fit a compact and a lip gloss, a USB drive, 3 printed document sets, and my attorney friend's direct cell number. River Mill called back in 38 minutes. They were ready. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and told my best friend to start redirecting the guests. I will not pretend the next hour was seamless. It was not. 212 people redirected across Atlanta on a Saturday afternoon, with no prior notice, is a logistical challenge. My uncle's crew met the catering van. My best friend managed the guest communication with a level of composure that I still marvel at. 3 of Christian's family friends arrived at Harrington Hall and found a small gathering of Christian's relatives being greeted by his mother with champagne, presumably waiting for the rest of us to arrive in defeat. They waited a while. I was in East Atlanta watching my wedding get set up. Christian called 11 times. I let it ring. His mother called twice. I let it ring. At approximately 1:15 in the afternoon, Christian arrived at River Mill. He had figured out, through the guest communication chain, where everyone had gone. He walked in wearing his wedding suit, looking pale, and found 212 people already seated, the catering team plating appetizers, and his bride standing near the bar with her bridal party and a very calm expression. He said my name. I looked at him for a long moment. I said, "I need to know if you knew." He said he had known his mother was making arrangements. He had not known she would cancel the original venue. He had thought she was adding something. He looked genuinely distressed, and I believed in that moment that he had not understood the full scope of what his family was doing. That did not change what I needed to do next. I told him that we needed to talk, privately, before any ceremony happened. We stepped outside to the courtyard. I had my bridal bag with me. I told him about the document I had found in the printer 4 months ago. I watched his face. He went very still. That was my parents' idea. I told them it was too much. I thought they had dropped it. I said they didn't drop it. And now your mother has canceled my wedding venue without telling me and redirected 200 of my guests to a club where they would not have been welcomed. Christian, I need you to tell me, right now, whether you are with me or whether you are with them. He didn't answer fast enough. It was not a long pause, maybe 6 seconds, but I had been measuring pauses like that my whole life. 6 seconds meant he was calculating. 6 seconds meant the answer was not immediate and instinctive. 6 seconds meant the question was harder for him than it should have been. I said, "Okay." He said, "What does okay mean?" I said, "It means I have my answer." I walked back inside. My best friend, who had been watching through the courtyard window, met me at the door. I told her what I needed. She nodded once and went to find the event coordinator. The ceremony did not happen that afternoon, but the reception did. I want you to understand what that means. My guests, my family from Decatur, my college friends, my colleagues, every person who had bought a plane ticket or driven hours to be there, they stayed, every single one of them. When I stood up and said, simply, that the ceremony had been postponed due to a family matter, but that I was not going to let the people who loved me stand around a parking lot, they stayed and they danced and they ate and we raised glasses, and my grandmother cried in the good way, and my cousin played 3 songs on his guitar, and my best friend made a toast that made 200 people laugh so hard they had to sit down. My friend from the news station arrived at 2:10. She had a camera operator with her. I met her outside and I handed her 2 things: a copy of the venue cancellation confirmation that showed it had been processed without my knowledge or consent, and a copy of the letter I had found in the printer 4 months ago. She looked at the letter for a long time. She said, "Can I quote you on the record?" I said yes. The story aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. Local family conflict, it became clear quickly, touched something broader. The segment ran longer than planned, and by midnight it had been shared thousands of times. The story was framed simply and accurately. A bride arrived at her own wedding to find the venue canceled by her future in-laws without her knowledge, and then discovered evidence of a post-wedding financial agreement her future in-laws had been planning to pressure her into signing. The venue cancellation, the attorney letter, my own calm account of what had happened. Nothing embellished, nothing needed to be. Christian's mother called me at 9:30 that night. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. I saved it. Christian texted me around midnight. He said he was sorry. He said he had not known what his parents were truly capable of. He said he understood if I could not forgive him. I have not yet decided what forgiveness looks like here. What I know is this: I spent the first 29 years of my life learning to be the person in the room who was always more prepared than anyone expected. I kept notes. I maintained contingencies. I documented things that felt wrong. Not because I knew this specific thing would happen, but because I understood from experience that when people underestimate you, they get careless. And careless people leave a paper trail. They had planned for a bride who would feel trapped. They had planned for embarrassment and social pressure, and 200 people standing in a parking lot to be enough to make me choose their version of the day. They had forgotten, or perhaps never bothered to learn, that I had spent my career managing exactly this kind of crisis. That I had contacts and contingencies and a best friend who could redirect an entire guest list by text message while wearing 4-inch heels. That I had read that letter in the printer 4 months ago and started quietly, calmly building an exit ramp. They had canceled my venue, I had moved the whole wedding. And the food, I will say this because it matters, the food at River Mill was extraordinary. My guests still talk about the short rib. My grandmother got a second piece of the peach cake. My uncle danced until the venue coordinator politely indicated that the cleanup crew was waiting. We owned that night completely, every corner of it. And when I walked out to my car at the end of the evening, my dress gathered in one arm and my bridal bag over my shoulder, I felt something I hadn't felt in the 3 years I had been trying to make myself fit into someone else's idea of where I belonged. I felt exactly like myself.